Hi, this is Michelle Watterson, the Karate Hottie, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Filthy Rich, you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Will Brooks, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
This is Victor Spot Goodridge.
I'm Lance Party Palmer.
Wikipedia, you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Ib, the E.T. Ting, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Yo, this is Dan, the Hangman Hooker, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Did you hear the one about me being a drunk? Did you hear the one about me losing my nerve?
Hey, fight fans, welcome to another edition of Stand and Bang Radio. I'm your host, Aaron Robbins, and finally back from his long vacation is Mark Modeski. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Aaron. Hey, how are you?
So where were you? Tell the fans where you went.
Where did I go? Well, I took a few days, and I wanted to go escape this treacherous cold that we have been suffering from, so took off to the Dominican Republic, Aaron.
Nice. And we also welcome back Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting tonight. Fred, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good, Aaron. Thanks for having me back, man.
Yeah, no problem. Fight fans, it turns out that Fred is probably going to be a semi-permanent addition to Stand and Bang Radio, so make sure you go follow him over at Gem City Fighting. At the end of the show, we'll let you know how to follow us all on Twitter. And joining us tonight is a true MMA legend. We have Gary Goodridge in the house. Gary, how are you doing tonight?
Tonight is good. Today's a good day. I'm doing great. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for being on the show. And without any further ado, I think we'll go ahead and do the first segment, which is normally the news. This news is kind of specific to UFC 184, but it's more or less the only news that's been going on, so why don't we tackle it? The first thing that I want to talk about tonight is Jaron Villel. That, for the fight fans that don't know, is the referee who almost let Mark Munoz get killed by Roan Canero, and then came back in for the Ellenberger versus Josh Koscheck fight, which he also let a choke go way too long. Kenny Florian said it best. If you can see that a guy is knocked out completely from where they are up in their Fox Sports Center thing in the stadium, then there's absolutely no reason why Jaron Villel could not see that both of these men had lost consciousness. I get very upset on things like this because I think that the fighter's safety is the most important thing that we can protect in the cage, and in both of these cases, it was obvious to, I would say, even casual fans that both of those men had lost consciousness, and I believe that when you have that kind of blood and air choke going on, even a few seconds makes a difference. And of course, now we're starting to see the memes with Josh Koscheck and that terrible bulldog drool that he had coming out of his mouth and that big wide-eye stare that he had. I want to hand this off to Fred first. Fred, what did you think about Jaron being so late on those stoppages?
Yeah, man, that was kind of hard to watch, wasn't it? It's kind of ironic that you have a ref blunder things that majorly twice in one night, and with the same kind of submission to a choke like that. And, you know, you could almost blame it on maybe he had a bad position or something, but he was right up on it in both of these situations, and he just let the fight go on way too long in both of those fights. I just think in general, too, the reffing in MMA is lackluster. It seems like they need a class or a course or something for these cats to take before they start reffing. Certainly big fights like UFC fights. When you got a guy like Jake Ellenberger on top of you, choking the crap out of you, you need a ref in there to save you when you need to be saved, man. That's a dangerous man. So yeah, that was brutal to watch. And in general, the reffing in MMA needs to step up its game big time.
No, absolutely. Gary, I want to get your opinion on this. Obviously, you're the fighter amongst us. What did you think about Jaron Villel being so late, and were you concerned at all with the fighter's health when things like that happen?
You know what? Such a fine line between proper right and wrong. It's such a hard thing. It's such a hard call, you know? These referees it ain't no joke to take the referee's course. It's rough. And, you know, I always felt safe with John McCarthy refereeing my match. But you gotta understand that how there's a very fine line in between enough and too much. And, that line can be crossed at any moment. So you gotta you got to be in the fight game. There's a fine line, you know. You're playing with that line every time that you're making a call. So these things are gonna happen. This is part of fighting. This is part of the real deal, you know. So yeah, it's bad. It's not good. It shouldn't be nice. Twice in one night, blah blah blah. But you know, shit. You know, these things happen, and they're going to maintain happening. This is what fighting is.
Okay, so in your opinion, Gary, it's pretty much par for the course, and the referee did his job.
Absolutely, 100%.
Okay, so we got support for Jaron from Gary, which is awesome. Mark, what did you think about that situation there? Were you a little bit surprised, or were you with Gary that it's pretty much just par for the course?
I'm going to kind of play Switzerland here and take both sides of the coin because, you know, at the end of the day, we're kind of fickle as fight fans, and it's really tough because, you know, if a fight stopped too early, you know, we're the first ones, I'm saying, as fans of the game and the sport, who are taking to Twitter and whatever and complaining, oh, that fight was stopped too quick, he could have recovered, didn't give him enough time or whatever. So, you know, from a ref's perspective, I get what Gary's saying in that it's a very fine line for, you know, the ref to actually sit there and watch a guy, you know, try and get back into it. Because, you know, a fighter can look like he's out, sometimes kind of come back up, and sometimes he's given a sport and chance. That being said, in this particular instance with Jaron Villal, man, the first one with the Munoz one, I was like, okay, you know what, maybe he kind of let it slip. That Koscheck one was frightening. Like, looking at Koscheck's face, man, he looked like a rabid dog. Like, you had to have known, like, 3 or 4 seconds at least before that happened. And 3 and 4 seconds in a choke is like a millennium. You had to have known that he was well out, even though he hadn't tapped yet. The guy looked like he'd been tapping out for 3 or 4 times before gave Ellenberger this tap on the arm. So I don't know, man. Honestly, I think this is one, from my perspective, instances where, you know, he should have had his eye. He should have tried to get in a better position if he wasn't in a good enough position. 2 mistakes in one card is too many for me.
Well, I have to agree with Gary because he's the only one of us that I believe has actually been in that situation. But at the same time, from a fan's perspective, that was very scary. And the fact that it was the same referee twice gives me a little bit of pause. So we're going to put that one to bed. And the next thing I want to bring up is the California Athletic Committee has decided to be proactive and announced that they are going to do PED testing with urine prior to all of the fights and blood testing after all of the fights. So this is the first time that we see an athletic commission being so proactive and so comprehensive with their PED testing and saying, I think, to all the other athletic commissions, you know, we're setting the bar high. We would like it if everybody else would also set this bar to get rid of this side of the sport. Gary, since you've been in the sport for so long and such an integral part of the sport, what do you think about the California Athletic Commission being so stringent with their testing? Do you think that's a great thing for the sport?
You know what? I have a different look on this altogether. I think that no matter what they do, how stringent or how tough and difficult they make it, there's always loopholes around it. You know, how much do you really want to win if you're not wanting to cheat? You know, everybody's going to cheat. Everybody's going to find different ways to cheat. You can make up whatever athletic commission that you want to do, check them this, check them that, and there'll be still loopholes. There'll be still guys that cheating. That's just the nature of the business. We're in that's the world we're in. You know, people want to get ahead. When you've done everything that you possibly can do, and you made all the different changes and sacrifices, how much do you really want to win if you're not willing to cheat?
Okay, that's a really interesting perspective. Now, I did want to ask you this too. You're one of the guests who has probably been in the game longer than anyone else we've had on the show. Do you believe that performance-enhancing drugs has been part of MMA since the start?
I don't believe so. You know what? You know, now that things are getting more refined, things are getting even better. You know, it comes down to really who's got the best chemist. You know, just like boxing. You know, it went on until if everything's even, it's who's taking the better drugs. That's all it is.
Okay, that's a great insider perspective. Thank you, Gary. Fred, what did you think about the old California Athletic Commission stepping up and doing this stringent testing?
I mean, I thought it was a great move, man. I will say that I do agree with Gary. There's a cynical part of me that is kind of like, you know, nothing you really do is ever going to abolish it or really get rid of it. there's always going to be guys wanting to do it, and there's always going to be somebody playing with a new strand that doesn't get caught or that beats the test or whatever. But that being said, what are you going to do? You know what I mean? You've got to try to do what you can to at least slightly deter these guys, because if not, it's already starting to kind of get out of control and run rampant in the sport. So all things considered, man, I thought it was a great move. I mean, what are you going to do if you don't do something like this? It's just going to get worse and worse. So I'm all for it.
All right, Mark, I'm going to pitch it over to you. Were you surprised about this comprehensive testing, especially since the commission told us that they are going to foot the bill for this, and that has got to be outrageously expensive?
No, I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, I'm sure there's been a lot of pressure going on, and I think, we've talked about this before, Aaron, in terms of, legitimizing the sport and whatnot, and making, helping people to take it a little bit more seriously. And, what's good for the goose is good for the gander at the end of the day and in the fight game. And, it's got to seem legit to people. Otherwise, people aren't going to take it seriously. It's going to, turn into pro wrestling. It's just going to be a bunch of guys people are going to see as just, bouncing around a ring. They want it to be a legit sport. I think this is a good move. I think it helps to, again, add a little bit more credibility into things. That being said, Gary brings up a really interesting point in terms of, guys are going to cheat no matter what. They're always going to kind of try and get an edge ahead. We talked about this again a few weeks ago, Aaron, where it was sort of like what I call the Lance Armstrong syndrome, where, he didn't see what he's doing as being wrong. He's keeping his competitive edge along with everybody else, because as far as he's concerned, everybody else is cheating. So he's not. He's just keeping pace. So I think this will help to sort of mitigate some of that moving forward, but it's always going to be a problem. It's going to be a problem that it's going to be a really hard one in professional sports in general, outside of MMA, to really manage moving forward. It's a great starting point. I hope it works. We'll see what the future holds.
I definitely have to take my hat off to Gary for bringing that up. That's a completely different perspective than I ever looked at it before. How much do you want to win? That drive to win. And then, of course, what Mark said with, if everybody is doing it and you're just trying to keep up with traffic, as it were, maybe some of these guys have the mentality that it's not so much cheating, it's just trying to create that even playing field. But in my opinion, I do want to say congratulations to the California Athletic Commission for being proactive and trying to bring legitimacy to this sport, which I know the four of us on this show love so much, and really want the fans to have a lot of faith in it becoming legitimate and just keep on growing. So, all right, we're going to put the old PEDs to bed. Unfortunately, that is a topic that's hard to stay away from nowadays because it's so prevalent. So we're going to switch gears, and like I said, this is more or less geared towards UFC 184. I have a question for the panel members, and Fred, you had mentioned something on our other show, Keyboard Warriors. Sometimes we are presented with fighters that have a big hype train behind them, and we saw two of those this weekend in Holly Holm and Kat Zingano. Now, a lot of times what happens with big hype trains is they get derailed big time. And I believe that at least in the case of Holly Holm, that is what we saw. She faced Rocky Pennington, and after all of the talk of her being a multiple-time champion in boxing and all of the highlight reel of her knocking out all of her opponents and being undefeated, what we were handed was more or less an anticlimactic fight where we saw somebody who really couldn't put the boxing together to make it look like MMA in Holly Holm's case, and in Rocky Pennington's case, somebody who may have bought into the hype train herself, because I don't think she was aggressive as she could have been, and I think had she been the aggressor, perhaps we would have seen a different outcome. Mark, what did you think about Holly's performance?
Confusing. Honestly, like, I went into this fight and I was expecting to see, the next sort of big thing up and coming in women's MMA, and she seemed tentative at best. She wasn't engaging very much. You could argue it was jitters. I mean, it's a big stage for her. There was a lot of pressure on her. Again, the hype train gets to people's consciousness sometimes. And, as everybody knows, Gary, I'm sure you can attest to this. I mean, probably more than 50% of the game is mental at the end of the day. And if you're getting rattled out there, you got millions of people watching you, you don't want to disappoint. And I think that's just what happened to her. She didn't want to go and do something stupid and lose her first fight, and she ended up playing too tentative a game. I was disappointed.
All right, Gary, I'm going to hand it off to you. What did you think of Holly Holm's performance, and were you a little bit disappointed after all of the hype that they did for her?
Yes, I was definitely disappointed, but the thing is that you buy into this crap. You buy into people pushing you, and you buy into what you're reading and what you're seeing, and sometimes you buy into it and you do good, and other times you buy into it and you fall on your face. It was very disappointing. The hype train certainly followed her. It was terrible. What can I say? These things happen.
Sure. Well, I'll ask you this. In your expert opinion, obviously you are our expert, what do you think she could have done? Because in my opinion, you get one chance to make a first impression in the UFC, and she left us with a bad impression. What would you have liked to see her do this weekend?
Well, you go out there and try your hardest. There's nothing wrong. When you go out there and you try your best and your hardest to win, everybody sees it, and people like that. If you're trying to win and you just don't, and you end up short, it's okay. You tried your best, and people like that. I stick my whole career was on that. Try your best. You go, and there was nothing wrong with that. And she'd be back again because she wants to win. You can see, it's how much are you really trying? How much do you really want to win if you're not trying? Do you understand what I'm saying?
No,
absolutely. If you're not trying, you got to be trying to win. So if she was trying to win, everybody would see that.
Yep. So put in that effort and go for broke. Fred, same question. Amen. Yeah, thank you. Same question, Fred. What did you think? Were you a little bit surprised with Holm?
You know what, man? I got to say, I was not all that surprised. I'm finally starting to get the point of trying to not buy into the hype train. Listen, this was her first fight in the UFC. Raquel Pennington was a big step up in competition. She had only fought on the local level. I mean, she had some highlight reel knockouts. She had a really good boxing pedigree and whatnot. But there's nothing like being in the UFC and fighting at the highest level. So I tried to come into that fight with, some noted expectations. I knew that this was her first fight. I knew it was a big step up. So I personally was trying not to expect that much. I thought she looked okay, all things considered. I think that had you taken some of the major hype away that she had, if she wasn't the co-main event on a big card like this, if everybody wasn't saying, she comes out and has a big performance, she could potentially fight Ronda Rousey. And she was just another girl getting a shot. If she would have opened up the card or something, I don't think nobody would really have that much of a problem with her performance. Her performance wasn't that terrible. It was just the fact that she was booked so high on the card, and she had so much hype that it felt a little underwhelming. I think people went into it thinking she was just going to starch Rocky in the first round. And when it became a competitive fight, people were kind of like, oh, well, hey, she's not as good as everybody thought she was. But that may not necessarily be the case. I think she just got a little rushed. I thought her performance was okay, not horrible.
Absolutely. I definitely want to see how it is. You could tell she was very anxious. Pacing the cage, her walk-in was very anxious. I look forward to seeing her back, because 17 years over with Winklejohn, you got to imagine she's got something for us that we didn't get to see in that first fight. Now, that's going to segue us into the other part of the big hype train, Cat Zingano. Now, before we take our first break, I'm just going to kind of roundtable this really quick. In my opinion, what we saw out of Cat Zingano could very well be the largest error I have ever seen in a game plan from a fighter. I believe that's what it boiled down to. I think we all got robbed out of the fight that it could have been, because rather than being the striker and keeping Ronda Rousey at distance, she rushed into her and more or less gave her her arm. Gary, would you agree with that assessment that it was just a colossal mistake on Cat Zingano's part?
Oh, 100%. The thing is that, I think she was having an argument with her corner. It had to be an argument with her corner how to start the fight, either the bum rush Ronda or to stay out and trade and bang. But and she did the exact worst thing. How do you bum rush somebody that goes over moves in their sleep? You can't win. As soon as I saw it, I said, "Oh, this will be quick." And what happened? Next minute later, she's got her in an arm lock. You can't bum rush somebody that goes over these things in their sleep, and that's exactly what she did. She went out there to try to force Ronda's hand, and ended up giving her arm.
Yeah, colossal error. Mark, what did you think when you saw her rush towards her with that knee?
You know, I think sometimes it kind of surprises me. The more I watch Ronda Rousey fight and the more I watch opponents fight her, I'm just surprised that they seem to some extent play into her hand a little bit. I know that Kat sort of had this thing in her head that, you know, a lot of people don't go in and sort of, you know, take it right to her right away, put the pressure on right away. But come on. Like, honestly, you know what she's going to do to you. You practice the defense on there. Even if you make a critical error like that off the outset, you practice your escapes so you can get out of the judo throws. Once you're on the ground, you can do your hip escapes so you're not going to get locked in the arm. Like, whatever you got to do. It's just, you know, I get where Kat's head was, and I do feel for her. The more I thought about it, to be honest, the more I actually felt bad for her, because I think she had, like, what she felt was a good plan in her head, but it just, you know, it just really, really backfired big time on her. And, I mean, good for Ronda. Like, honestly, she's the best.
Guaranteed. All right, Fred, you get the last word before we take our first break.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to say that it was a horrible mistake. Obviously, it backfired in a major way. But hindsight is 20/20, right? You know, I think that Kat maybe felt like her best chance to win would be with her ground and pound. And maybe if she caught Ronda off guard and happened to end up on top of her in the very beginning of the fight, maybe she could just overwhelm her right from the jump, you know, just jump on her. Like I said, hindsight's 20/20. Obviously, it didn't go her way. Yeah, I mean, it was a bad decision, but like I said, you can't look back and you know, try to debate what you should have or shouldn't have done. She did it, and that's what it is. You know, Ronda's a very, very high level grappler. So once they got in that exchange and she didn't end up on top in that transition, she probably knew that it was a bad mistake, but at that point, there's no taking it back. So it is what it is.
Exactly, and there's already been a lot of talk. Dana White said she'll get another shot, and even Ronda herself has been very gracious throughout this loss, and said she would like to see Kat Zingano get another shot at it because she knows she did make a mistake, and maybe the second fight would be more entertaining for the fans. So we're going to go ahead and take our first break, but before we do, I want to let the fans know that we are presented by LubMMA.com, LUBMMA.com. Go ahead and check out that website for all of your daily news, and there are a couple other entertaining things over there. It's a nonprofit organization helping out everybody in MMA, so check out LubMMA.com, and we're also honored to have Unique Kennels on our banner. Jamie Skipper has been breeding English Bulldogs for over 30 years at Unique Kennels, so go ahead and check him out on Twitter at Unique Kennels 71, or go over to Facebook at Unique Kennels/Conway and check out their pups.
Hi, I'm Andrea KTB Lee, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Max Leonard Holloway.
This is Charmaine Not So Sweet Tweet.
Hi, this is Kelly McGill, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, this is Jansen Medeiros, and you're listening to Stand and Bang Radio.
Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. I am here with Mark Modeski.
Hey-o.
And Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting.
Hey, what's happening, man?
And we have MMA legend Big Daddy Gary Goodridge with us. Gary, how you doing?
Gary is great.
Gary is great. And what we're going to do for this segment here, we're going to talk about the great things that Gary is doing. Gary, you had a book written, helped write a book. Why don't you go ahead, give us the title of that book, and tell us what's inside of there for the fans.
Well, I wrote a book called Gatekeeper with a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, a PhD, Mark Dorsey, and it's actually a pretty honest book. So it's if you don't mind reading brutally honest things, and I tend to be brutally honest with what I say and how I say things, then it's not the book for you. But it's a very good book. I like it.
Okay, and what kind of topics do you cover in that brutally honest book?
I cover absolutely everything. How I got in the fight-in, how it started, the middle of fight-in, how it ended, everything. There's 14 years in one book.
Now, I'm not sure if all fans are aware of this, but besides your extensive MMA career, you also have a very extensive kickboxing career. Is that covered in the book as well?
Kickboxing, yes. Kickboxing. And don't forget, I was an arm wrestler for 11 years before that as well.
No, I absolutely could not forget the arm wrestling championships.
Yeah.
Out of all of the things that you've done, Gary, what would you say that you miss the most?
I really miss my fans. I really miss the fans. The fans that are fighting. I became a really good name in Japan, and I really miss the fans in Japan.
No, absolutely, and we all know that you do a very good job of connecting with your fans on social media. We were talking about your Twitter today. You are one of the few MMA legends who more or less, if any of your fans contact you or follow you, you're going to follow right up and have a conversation with them. Is that right?
Well, I do quite a bit on Twitter. I talk to a lot of fans on Twitter about this, about that, about anything, about their day, whatever. I try to keep myself busy.
Okay, now tell the fans so we can get those Twitter numbers up. Go ahead and give us your handle. Where are you at Twitter?
My handle is at Gary H. Goodridge. That's it.
All right, that's very simple. All right, Fred, I'm going to hand it off to you. What kind of questions do you have for Big Daddy tonight?
Okay, Gary, I'm just kind of curious. You fought all around the world. You fought, like you said, in kickboxing and the highest level in MMA. What would you say is your funnest moment? What fight or what moment was the funnest for you looking back on your career?
The funnest moment, I'd like to say, a moment that sticks out of my head is actually fighting one of the best in the fight game, Peter Arts. This was one of my best moments I had, although I lost to him, but it was just a really good pinnacle time for me in my career. It was a man becoming a boy becoming a man, because this guy was so high level. I went through so much pain in that fight. I was so happy to finish it.
That's amazing.
That was a real pinnacle time in my career. Trust me. I'm not talking about it enough. Trust me. It was a lot of pain in order to go through that fight. This guy's still fighting today.
Yeah, I know, and he's still pretty amazing. Was that in K1 or?
That was in K1.
Yeah, that is amazing. I bet that was amazing for you. How old was you at the time? Do you remember?
I was probably 33, 34.
Nice.
Okay, I wanted to ask you a question, Gary, about all of the different organizations that you have been in. It sounds like Japan was one of your best times. So would you say that Pride during your MMA career, was Pride kind of like the pinnacle of your career? Is that where you would kind of like to be remembered, was your Pride moments, or was it your early UFC days? What really defined you? What defined you? What did you find was your best moments in MMA?
Oh man, it's hard to say. There was so many of them. I fought a lot of times, like 100 times. So what was really good? It was all good. I loved it. If I was making money and I was punching somebody in the face, I was having fun.
That's a very honest answer. Mark, what do you got for him?
First and foremost, I want to take a brief fanboy moment to just really thank Gary for coming out, because as not many of our viewers know, Gary and I both hail from Barrie, Ontario. And as most people probably don't know, there's probably about nobody of any stature who's ever come out of Barrie. Gary's kind of been a legend in Barrie for a long time, and I grew up as a young kid, about 14, 15 years old, watching Gary come up through the ranks. So, it's a privilege for me to even have him here on this show today. Like I say, Gary's a local legend, regardless. He'll always be a local legend.
Thank you very much.
You probably don't remember Gary, but you even used to go into my mom's dentist office back in the day.
Yeah, way back when, yeah. Thank you.
Way back in the day, but I guess my question...
Well, hang on a minute. Couldn't be that far back in the day. I'm only 49. Relax. You sound like I'm 100.
Back-ish in the day.
Yeah, I was going to say, Mark, be careful, because he is an MMA legend in your hometown, so it's feasible that he could knock on your door. So treat Mr. Goodrich with a lot of respect here, buddy.
Back in the day, he sounds like I'm 100 years old.
Well, Gary, this boy's slowly become a man over the last couple of years. So, back in the day was a long time ago for me. But at any rate, my question kind of dovetails into what both Aaron and Fred said, and I don't even know if you have a stance on this, but you had some really crushing finishes, and both Pride and the UFC. Which one really stands out for you as like, you know, you came out of that and you knew you did some serious damage to your opponent?
Oh man, I had so many of them. The best finish that I had, you know, I was kind of watching one the other day and I thought it was good. I fought this Russian guy. It was a big Russian guy, Alan something or the other. He was like 480 pounds. That's 6'5". This man was crushing walnuts with his fingers, and you know, between his fingers, his pinky finger and his thumb, his other finger, and he'd go up and crush walnuts. And I fought him. He was by far the strongest man I've ever fought. You know, and just before that, I was rolling around with Bob Sapp, and Bob Sapp was picking me up with one arm and throwing me all over the damn place. And here I am going to fight the strongest man I ever fought. Man, I was so scared to fight this guy. Anyways, I ended up pulling off a win because I don't think he's ever been involved in a MMA match. Ended up giving him a rape choke and choked him out.
Oh, man, that's a devastating way to go down.
Absolutely. And just kind of imagining Bob Sapp and then a Russian fighter that large. Now, I don't know what you guys think, but I've been watching the UFC and MMA and Pancrase for 20-plus years. I'm 38 years old. I remember Gary Goodridge coming on the scene and thinking to myself, oh, man, somebody is about to have their night ended. And, of course, for me, the one that will stick in my mind forever, and I still think I have a nightmare every now and then, is the Herrera knockout, where you got Herrera in the where you got him in the crucifix and then destroyed him with elbows. Do you still remember how that felt to get that finish?
Absolutely. You know what? Paul Herrera is probably still dizzy today because of it.
I wouldn't doubt that at all. That was so devastating. I want to tell the fans that if you're a younger guy who believes that the UFC started around Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner, go back in time, do yourself a favor, get on YouTube and search Gary Goodridge versus Paul Herrera. You will never be the same again. And I have to say thank you, sir, for that knockout, because like I said, that is an indelible a memory for the rest of my life.
It's still in the top 20 of UFC finishes.
I don't see how it couldn't be. Fred, I'm going to throw it over to you. Yeah, definitely. Fred, I'm going to throw it over to you. What have you seen Gary do that kind of, locks it in that Gary was one of the baddest men back in the day? No, not back in the day. In recent history.
Yeah, you got to clear that up real quick. I hate to coattail on what you said, but it has to be that finish. That finish was such an iconic finish. Like, that's the type of finish that actually changed the sport and probably brought in droves of fans. I mean, especially cats like your age, Aaron. I'm sure you could find, hundreds and thousands of guys who watched that fight live that night that, caught the bug long before there was an Ultimate Fighter. And that was all because of that one finish from Gary Goodridge. I mean, that was such an iconic finish. I mean, that has to be the one that, like you said, it's still in the top 20 to this day. I mean, that was just all kinds of amazing, man, for sure. A game changer, a sport changer.
Absolutely. Now, Gary, I want to touch on something, and you can feel free to fill in the blanks. For me, prior to seeing you come out in the gi and being able to mix grappling and striking, it seemed like it was a one or the other sport. And then when you came on the scene, you kind of seemed to be one of the pioneers, one of the templates for what is actually mixed martial arts, because you were actually mixing grappling and good striking. Would you agree with that assessment?
100%. When I came out of the gi, here's what happened. Let me give you this little downplay. When I came out of the gi, because I saw Hoist Gracie choking everybody out in armbar and everything. I didn't know anything about fighting at the time, but I saw Hoist Gracie using the gi towards his advantage. I thought, what the hell? Why can't I use one? So I went out to the local Koksuwan club, got a nice black gi, and started training in it. And next thing you know, I started training a month before my fight in San Juan, Puerto Rico, UFC 8. Art Davies called me and gave me that fight, and did the gi help me? Not really, but I felt safe with it.
Okay, now as you continued to study, did you see that you were starting to kind of create a skill gap in between the others that you were fighting, because you did have two different areas to go to? You could grapple and you could strike?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
it was great. I had a good time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Now, Fred, Mark, is there anything else that you guys want to ask Gary before we kind of go on to what he's doing currently?
I got one quick question that I want to ask. Don Fry. You know, a lot of people talk about the Herrera knockout. That Don Fry head kick knockout gives me chills watching every time. How good was it getting revenge on that?
You know what? It was great. You know, it was a long time coming. But when you read into it, it's to really see what you did. I love Don Fry. Don Fry is such a really, really good man, and a good friend of mine too. You know, I can get off the phone right now and give him a call. He's just a really good man. But it was such a huge thing to finally get a win on Don Fry, because the year prior to that kick, he had beaten me twice in '96. So it was nice getting. So it was such a relieving thing to get. But Don Fry's he's a superhuman. I love the guy.
No, absolutely, and we'll talk about that. Perhaps you can bridge the gap, because we would love to have Don Fry on the show. That is another guy that is just makes indelible memories, and I can't remember his opponent off the top of my head, but his back and forth rock'em sock'em battle with that Japanese fighter over in Pride, where they just decided, no skill involved. We're just going to grab onto the back of each other's heads.
Oh yeah.
And just give her hell. Now, can you kind of give the fans an idea? Was Don Fry as strong as he looked?
Oh, he was stronger, and he was skilled. He was a very strong individual, and he was skilled.
Now, this is something that I kind of wanted to ask you before we go on to what you're currently doing in your gym. Do you believe that the caliber, although the skill level is higher, we don't seem to have any of these, true badasses? Do you know what I mean? Like, Don Fry was a badass. You were a badass. Do you think that the newer generation of fighters are as tough, just honestly as tough, as the guys who were up and coming in Pride and UFC in the mid-90s?
I would have to say no. I would have to say that it's making them softer, simply because, when we fought, we had to win 3 fights in one night. These guys are fighting 3 fights in 1 year. Is that tough? No. That's. Is there any women on the panel right now?
No. Go.
That's making some pussies.
There you go.
If you're gonna fight 3 fights in one night, man up. 3 fights in 1 year? Come on.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people don't understand the whole Grand Prix thing. And so how does it make you feel when you see this prevalence of injuries? Oh, my ankle got twisted. Oh, my pinky hurts. I mean, you guys fought injured every fight. Would that be a fair assessment?
Exactly. Oh, the guy got poked in his eye. Who cares? You got another eye. But we had to go through a rough time to get what we got, and then they're reaping the rewards of the fruits of our labor. We labored so they can have it the way they have it now. But it's hard for me to understand, how can you call yourself tough if you only want to fight 3 fights in 1 year?
Yeah, and some guys not even.
Yeah.
And some guys not even.
In the night.
Right, some guys not even 3 in a year. I mean, we've got plenty of them that are averaging, 8-9 months in between fights, so they're only getting 2, maybe 1, 2 fights every year and a half. So definitely
exactly.
No. I think that you guys came from a tougher breed. I do think that they stand on your shoulders now, and like I said, fight fans, if you don't know who we're talking about with Don Fry, Gary Goodridge, Dan Severn, some of the old guys, some of the old school guys that were fighting back in the mid-90s. Well, Gary's not that far from me. I'm in the Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It wouldn't be out of the realm of reality for Gary to knock on my door, too. So, hey, he's 49 years young. Go ahead, guys. If you haven't seen the UFC in Pride in the mid-90s, go check out YouTube, buy some videos, and make sure that you check out Gary Goodridge and what he did for the sport, because without him, we would not have the sport that we have today. And speaking of that, you are still giving back to the sport. Why don't you go ahead and segue into what you're doing now at your local gym to give back to the citizens and to the youth there? Well,
I travel every Tuesday, and I go down to Woodbridge, and I teach down there at Ultimate Martial Arts in Woodbridge. I teach them, and I also teach up here in Barrie at a school. But that's all I'm doing. Just teaching here and there, and it's hard, Everybody and their dog wants to be a fighter, so you have to help them read through and pick out who you want and who you don't want. tell them who's a fighter and who's not.
Sure, because not everybody can do it. All right, Fred, do you have any questions about what he's doing at the gym now?
Yeah, just kind of curious in general, up there in Canada, how is the MMA bug? There was a bit of a kind of speculation going around there for a minute that the Canadian MMA talent pool was starting to dwindle a little bit, that less stars were coming out of Canada as far as MMA concerned. In your gyms that you're teaching at, Gary, is there a lot of younger fighters coming in, or is it kind of stagnant, or what is your perspective on that?
Oh, absolutely. I have an amazing fighter right now. His name is Nathan Donaldson. That's out of Bradford that I've been training for a while. This guy's ready to fight anytime, but I just got to line up on the proper place to get him in. This guy will be a star.
Okay, so
that's cool.
Yeah, you would say that Canada still has a good talent pool. We're not going to see Canada fall. All right, we're not going to see Canada falling off the map. All right, Mark, do you have any questions for Gary about what he's up to right now?
I think we're good to hit the break, Aaron.
Well, actually, before we go to break, Gary, I want you to be a little bit more specific. Go ahead, tell the fans the name of the book one more time, where they can get it, and give us your Twitter handle again.
It's called Gatekeeper. Done by myself and Mark Dorsey. Gatekeeper, you can get it at any bookstore. It's out, and my Twitter handle is at Gary H. Goodridge.
All right,
at Gary H. Goodridge. I'll talk to you on Twitter.
All right, so everybody, make sure that you engage with Gary. Get his Twitter following up. These are the type of guys that we need to keep in the forefront because, like I said, without them, we would not have modern MMA. So we're going to take our second break. You've been listening to Stand and Bang Radio. You can find us on lubmma.com. And if you like our banner, go ahead and check out Swift MMA over on Facebook. We're going to be changing banners soon, but Swift MMA was the guy who came up with our original banner. He works over at Beatdown Palace. So go ahead over there, get friends with him over on Facebook, and give Beatdown Palace a like. Hey, fight fans, welcome back to Stand and Bang Radio. I'm Aaron Robbins. I'm here with Mark Modeski. Mark?
Hey-o.
Fred Kirby from Gem City Fighting. Fred?
Hey, what's happening, fellas?
And MMA legend Gary Goodridge. Gary, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure.
All right, so we are going to finish up the last segment talking about a huge weekend of fights. We don't do a lot of talking about Bellator on this show, and we're not going to do a lot of talking about Bellator. I do want to give a shout out to two of my former guests. Linton Vassell took on Sokaju and beat him convincingly, and Liam McGeary beat Emmanuel Newton to become the very first UK champion in a major American fight organization. So congratulations to Liam McGeary. Congratulations to Linton Vassell. Hopefully we can have you back on the show and you guys can tell us how that went. So real quick, we're just going to touch on Invicta FC 11. The headliner there was Cyborg versus Charmaine Tweet. Now, Charmaine Tweet is a friend of the show. We've had her on a couple of times. And so obviously the results of this fight weren't personally fun to watch, but visually stunning. Cyborg was able to get the finish, I believe, in 43 seconds. And in that 43 seconds, it was utter destruction of Charmaine Tweet. She ended up bleeding horrifically from her mouth and nose, ended with more or less a body shot. Fred, was that a jaw dropper for you?
Yeah, I mean, it usually is with Cyborg. I kind of expected something like that, but it was definitely devastating to look at and actually see and witness. Cyborg is a beast, man. She is a devastating striker. If she lays her hands on you, you are in a world of shit. So, I just feel kind of bad for Cyborg because she's in an awkward spot. She's in an awkward weight division. So she's such a talented fighter and such a polarizing figure, but she can't really, there's nobody for her to fight. There's kind of nowhere for her to go. And you almost can't mention Cyborg without mentioning Ronda Rousey. And there's this whole thing, but they're in different organizations, different weight classes. There's a lot of stuff in between there. Judging just her performance that night, it was astonishingly brutal for sure.
You know, you bring up a good point. Talk about a weight class difference. I don't know if you guys were able to see this. She was on both Twitter. I mean, I'm sure through her Instagram it hit Twitter and Facebook. She stepped on a scale, I believe it was yesterday, because she said it was 2 days after the fight. Cyborg weighs 175 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, I seen that. That.
That's a big woman.
That's huge.
Gary, she fights at 145. They're talking about her meeting Ronda at 140 or 135, and you're talking 48 hours after the fight, she was 175 pounds. You're not talking about a small weight discrepancy. She is ginormous compared to Ronda Rousey.
Wow, she drains her body of water.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That has got to be just a brutal. I mean, you're talking about 30 pounds. So now, Gary, we're going to throw that over to you because that is something that you can kind of chime in. How much weight cutting did you do during your career?
You know, I think I lost a half a pound one time.
Okay, did that?
No, you kidding? I've been a heavyweight since I was 10 years old.
Yeah. All right. So half a pound. What was it? Grueling to have to put the ravioli down 3 bites early to lose that half a pound?
Well, not the ravioli, cheesecake, man.
Cheesecake.
Oh man, I love cheesecake.
Poutine.
Yes.
So you only had one piece of cheesecake rather than 2 the night you had to fight, huh?
Yes.
All right, that's fantastic. Mark, what do you think about the whole Cyborg Rousey thing? What did you think about the Charmaine tweet fight? Do you think we're ever going to see Rousey and Cyborg, or is that kind of like that mythical we're going to see George St. Pierre back someday?
Well, first off, I'm not going to I can't talk bad about Charmaine just because, A, she's, friend of the show. She's a fellow Canadian. I can't, I feel bad. It was hard to watch that fight. Cyborg is a beast. Honestly, as a fighter, she's a beast. I'd be afraid to face her in the cage any day. That'd be like me stepping into the cage with Gary Goodridge right now. My face would be smashed into the other side of my head in about 30 seconds, but do I think we're ever going to see Rousey and Cyborg? I'm going to say no. For me, even to hope to see something that amazing, I've just been let down so many times. I've had promises from Dana White about these massive super fights we're going to see maybe one day, and he doesn't really seem to be playing this one up too much. So I'm going to have to go with a Nettie no-no on that one in terms of us ever seeing that fight. And please don't ever talk bad about GSP on this show again.
I wasn't talking bad about GSP. I just talked bad about...
I know you were goading me, Aaron.
I was a little bit.
And you know it.
But mostly, and Fred knows this because of over at Keyboard Warriors, I am just so tired. I said something over on Keyboard Warriors, and I'll say it on Stand and Bang. There's no such thing as Santa Claus, your mom was the Easter Bunny, and GSP is never coming back to the UFC. So just let that sink in, and if you don't like it, hit me up on Twitter and tell me I'm wrong.
Hey, that's fine. I agree with you, but he's still probably greatest pound for pound all time, maybe after Silva a little bit.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Fantastic fighter. He's just not coming back. He's got to do better things. I think, you know what? I think they might make Rousey Cyborg happen, but it won't be for a championship. No way. I believe that they'll say, hey, you know what, Ronda, don't cut weight, and Cyborg, go ahead and try to get to 140. I never see it happening at 135. I never see it happening for the title. So I guess we're all kind of agreement in that. And why don't we go ahead and check out UFC 184, which actually, after all of the complaining and bitching that fans do and skip 184 and all of this nonsense, I don't know about you guys, but I thought it was a solid card. Lots of great fights, lots of great finishes. Gary, what did you think of 184 overall as a card?
You know what? It was a good card. It was a very good card. Dana does a good job. Very, very good card. It was entertaining all the way.
No, I agree. Would you, Fred and Mark, would you guys agree that this was definitely one that was worth the cash?
It was for me. I mean, I knew when Ronda got that massively quick finish, it was going to, drive a rift down the fans. You were going to have some fans that were going to be totally into it, such as me. I love stuff like that. If you can get a quick finish, I love the Mike Tyson type aura, the finish and the mystique that brings. So I don't care how fast the fight ends. When it ends in a devastating fashion and everybody's left with their jaws agape, I'm all over that. But some people don't like that. They want to see a nice grueling war like they see on action films. But to each their own, I thought it was it was the perfect end to a really good card.
There you go. Mark, were you entertained by the card overall?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm one of those fans who's going to get the card no matter how good or bad it actually is at the end of the day on paper, because you never know what's going to happen at the end when all's said and done. I'm kind of with Fred on this, to be honest with you. I love those quick, fast finishes. I mean, where it just kind of totally catches you off guard, and that's why I love the sport. It's at any given moment, you never know what's going to happen. The only fight that was a bit of a letdown and kind of, a little bit slowed down the pace of the overall event was the Holly Holm fight.
All right, so what we're going to do to finish up the last 10 minutes or so of the show, we're going to start at the early prelims, just going to kind of make a quick comment on that, then we're going to go prelims main card, okay? So we'll just talk about the fights. The only thing I have to say about the early prelims is I believe at this case, Kraus is probably looking at his next fight, if he has another one, that is going to be a do-or-die fight. They gave him Lazaro. I believe that Lazaro was supposed to lose that fight, came out with the win. Kraus did not look impressive, and I think that this one is kind of like, his next one is definitely going to be do or die. Fred, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the UFC, you get to a point to where you've got to be winning fights or proving a point in some way. And listen, their roster is bloated beyond belief. I know they have a lot of shows to fill, but Jack, you got to be doing something to keep your spot these days, or they're going to give you the cut. Exactly.
Gary, that's a good question to throw over to you. When you were in the UFC, how big would you say that the roster was altogether? The guys who are regularly fighting in the UFC.
The roster was always big, was always deep, because there's always somebody they can fill your spot, and they tell you that we can fill your spot. So 100%. If you don't put out, get out.
Okay, so that's been the mentality from day one. We can fill your spot, so if you don't perform, you got to go.
Yeah, if you don't play, do what you got to do.
Okay, guaranteed. All right, so Mark, what do you think? Kraus kind of on the chopping block here?
I think that's a definite yeah. That's all. I think the guys here have covered it off pretty well. I mean, plain and simple. Yeah.
Okay.
You don't put up, get out.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we're going to go on to the big guys. So Gary has something to say. Gary, what did you think about Potts versus Lewis? Hoan Potts versus Derek Lewis. That was, I thought it was going to stop a little bit earlier, but Derek Lewis is a wrecking machine. How would you have liked to fight that young boy back when you were active?
You know what? I thought it was pretty good. I thought the fight was very good. It was went pretty even. It would have been a good time to see me have a fight. Would have been good to fight him.
Yeah, I think you and Derek would have matched up well. I was kind of surprised that Derek couldn't get Juan out a little bit earlier. Fred, what did you think? Were you happy with that heavyweight knockout there?
Yeah, I love to watch the heavyweights fight, man. Derek Lewis is a massively huge man that hits incredibly hard, so he's always fun to watch fight. I will say I'm terribly disappointed in Potts, though, man. When he came in, he was supposed to be this grappling champion, and I don't know. I'm longing for the new Frank Mir, a big heavyweight that's got some nasty submissions that can kind of dominate with that. And I thought just maybe this would be the guy that we could kind of hang our hat on, and he has just been a bust, Jack. He came out and just got whooped on by Derek Lewis. So, yeah, it's always fun to see a nice big heavyweight knockout. So I'm all over it.
All right, so Fred is not sold on Potts. I have to agree. Mark, we'll give you the last one before we move on to the next guys.
Hey, this was it was a fun little knockout to watch. I mean, I didn't even see it coming. I actually turned my back when it happened, and no, good for him, man. I guess it wasn't technically a knockout; it was a TKO, but it just looked like he was on top of him 1 second, and it was done the next. It was crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, good for Lewis. That's what I'm saying. It's like,
No, fantastic. Yeah, of course, fantastic. All right, that's going to bring us over to Diego Lima versus Tim Dirty Bird Means. Diego's a fan of the show, or a friend of the show. I keep saying fan. I'm sorry, a friend of the show. It is hard for me to say this, but in his last performance, he won, but he got dinged on the chin, and he was in trouble. And then as soon as Tim put his hands on his chin, he was in trouble again, and this one actually ended up being a first-round knockout, and a pretty devastating one at that. And I kind of want to throw this over to Gary. Gary, are there some fighters that are just built to where they really can't take that knockout punch? Some guys are durable, and some guys, you just see it in them that that if you hit them, they're going down?
100%. You know what? my nemesis was Ray Safu. You know, you couldn't knock him out, and yet he had amazing knockout power. Some guys just can't take it. They just can't take the pressure. They can't take the. They can't. It's like Frank Mir. You just have to sometimes slap him, and he'll fall asleep.
That is an accurate assessment. All right, so right from the expert's mouth, some guys can take that hit, some guys can't. You guys have anything to say on this one before we move into the no contest between Salazar and Yamamoto?
Yeah, I'd like to just quickly add, as soon as the fight ended, I tweeted something along the lines of, I think maybe moving up in weight could be the new weight cutting. It seems like we're seeing guys move up a weight division and all of a sudden have impressive performances. Anthony Johnson was fighting at 170, and all of a sudden he's a legitimate threat to John Jones, the baddest man walking planet Earth. This is a guy that used to be a welterweight.
At 30 pounds heavier. We got to keep that in mind. We were talking about Justino being 175 pounds and Gary Goodridge cutting a half a pound, and Gary was never short on power. So you know what, Fred, that's a damn good point. And I think a lot of guys need to be kind of aware of that. That, man, you're not depleting yourself. You come in there and you're the athlete that you are in the gym.
Yeah, exactly. You look at Frankie Edgar. I don't think it's no mystery. Obviously he's an incredible fighter, but he doesn't cut the weight, man. He doesn't get tired. That's no mystery, man. He doesn't go through that grueling process. I think Tim Means looked fantastic. He looked, strong. He looked all over it, man. So I think that, moving up a weight division could end up maybe helping a lot of guys. Those guys that are cutting a lot of weight and really draining themselves to get to that lower weight division. I don't think you're necessarily giving yourself a competitive edge at that point anymore.
All right, that is a fantastic point to bring up. Thank you. I think we're just going to kind of skip over Salazar versus Yamamoto. That ended up in a no contest due to an eye poke. Feel bad for Salazar. It looked like he really could not recover. That left eye just would not open, would not blink. So we're going to move on over to Muniz versus Carnero. Juan Carnero, what did they say? He had not been in the ring in, they said some ridiculous amount of days, but it ended up being almost 6 years. He came out looking like a world killer against Munoz. Mark Munoz has not been looking good lately, and then caught him in that forever lasting rear naked choke, which we already talked about. And it's so disturbing to me because I love Mark Munoz. You don't want to see a guy be asleep for that long. And Jaron Vallel actually had to take his cue from Juan Carnero. If you notice, Carnero eased up on the choke, looked at Munez's face, looked up at Jaron, was like, "He's sleeping, buddy." So, what did you think about that one, Gary? Were you surprised? Were you surprised how well Carnero looked after such a long layoff from the cage?
You know what? He did look very good. He looked smooth. He looked well rested. Yeah, I was surprised. Very surprised.
Okay, were you happy? You were happy with the finish, but let's go back to that referee. In your expert opinion, if a fighter who is choking you knows that you're out, don't you think the referee should know first?
100%. But you got to understand, it's such a fine line in between enough and too much. And that's what makes this game exciting, because you don't know it. I mean, sometimes we can sit here and say, "Oh yeah, he's choking, he's got boogers coming out," but that don't mean nothing,
Okay, that's fair.
It's a fine line.
There you go. And absolutely,
I never felt safe fighting if John McCarthy was my referee.
So you say Big John is probably the pinnacle of the sport.
100%.
I have to agree with that. Now, Fred, you actually put a meme up right away of Juan Carnero's face kind of looking at Jaron Lavelle going like, "Hey, man," and what did you put on there? The moment you have to tell the referee your opponent's out or something like that?
Yeah, that was the caption, that awkward moment where you have to tell the ref, "Hey, man, he's asleep. I don't want to have to accidentally kill him, call the fight. I'm looking at you, look at me, choke the shit out of this guy, so I know he's out, or at least, listen, Gary makes a very good point. I want to say that reffing is probably a very hard job. So we can all, be keyboard warriors and sit back and be like, "Oh, well, they should have stopped it." It's probably very hard to make that judgment call. And, you're talking about seconds in there. If he makes that call 3-4 seconds earlier, we're not even having this conversation.
Exactly.
And 4 seconds is not a long time. So, I do get Gary's point that you can't be so extremely hard on these guys. But that being said, man, you gotta err on the side of caution. I'd rather have a fighter bitching at me saying, "Hey, man, I wasn't asleep. You should have let it go," than having to scrape some poor guy off the canvas that just got completely choked unconscious when you could have prevented that. So
okay, 2 things that I want to say on that. Juan Carnero let up, which I thought was very sportsmanlike of him. He felt Mark Munoz go. He actually adjusted his arms to allow blood and air to go back to Mark Munoz's head, which is great. Number 2, like you said, scrape a guy off the canvas. I don't know if you guys watched after. Mark Munoz was face down for quite a while, completely gone. So that was one of those where a lot of times you'll see a rear naked choke, somebody goes out, they pop back awake in a second, and they're like, what happened to me? Not on this one, man. So in my opinion, it is a fine line, but Jaron, next time, man, when the guy choking the other guy looks up at you, might want to grab his wrist and let it go. Mark, do you have anything to say before we move on to El Kukui versus Tebow?
No, I just want to throw this out there that maybe we're moving into the age of no more referees. Fighters just ref their own fights.
Hey, that would be great. I mean, they're starting to tell the ref when they've been hitting the cup. They're starting to tell the ref when they've been eye poked. Starting to tell the ref when they've choked out their guy. So I don't know. Except for Big John McCarthy and Herb Dean, I say to hell with all of them anyways. So let's go ahead and look into Tony Ferguson versus Gleison Tebow. Tony Ferguson is looking absolutely fantastic, and he handled Gleison Tebow in a way that I have not seen Gleison handle in a while.
Yeah.
Finished it with a rear naked choke. Is that correct? A rear naked choke?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Yeah, and Gleison, we've talked time and time again, this guy's had 25 fights or something like that in the UFC. I mean, it doesn't get to be a larger veteran than this. Tony Ferguson came in there, looked like a world killer. Gary, what do you think about Tony? You think rising star right now? You think this guy is going to go to the top?
He's a rising star, but it all depends on his corner, because of course the fighter does a fight, but if his corner stays with him and stays intact, yeah, he has the potential to go right to the top.
All right, that is a good... You are giving us all sorts of great insider gems, by the way. I'm going to advertise the hell out of this show. This might be one of the best insider inputs that I've ever gotten on the show. So, Fred, what did you think about El Kukui taking out Gleison so easily?
It's funny, man. I had a few friends over when I was watching the fight, and, a so-called hardcore fan myself, the fight comes on, and I'll usually try to paint the scene a little bit for my buddies, and I'm like, listen, I'm telling you guys right now, Gleison Tebow is a boring fighter. This dude is about to stink up the pay-per-view. There's good stuff coming, but Gleison is going to come out. He's going to blanket this guy.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. Just get ready, guys. This fight is going to be slow. And bigger than shit, I couldn't have been more wrong. El Kukui came out, looked fantastic, and actually finished Gleison, which I would have never predicted in a million years. He made it an exciting fight. It was awesome, man. El Kukui's got a lot of potential if he can just keep his head on right and start and just keep this winning track going. He could be a good star, man. He could be a big lightweight is extremely deep, but he's got all the potential.
I absolutely agree. Mark, you and I have talked about it, and I think maybe we were wrong. We said that this guy may not break top 5. I'm going to have to disagree with ourselves and say after his last 2 performances, I think we may have been wrong.
Well, you know what, Aaron? You could be very right. I mean, unlike Fred, I was not sitting at home with friends. I was sitting at home by myself, watching this event. By the way, Gary, that's an open invitation anytime you want to swing by to watch a card.
Would love to.
Anytime, brother, anytime.
Where do you watch fights?
I watch fights at home.
You okay?
On my 55-inch Samsung. But you know what? I think we both called Gleison on this one. I can't remember in our early predictions.
No.
And it was probably...
No.
Okay, well,
no.
I did.
I never
sure
never called Gleison Tebow, ever.
Well, usually usually like Fred says, he usually blankets the guy, sit on top of him for 3 rounds, eke out the win. I thought it was great to see that choke. I was shocked, to be honest with you. I was shocked to see him get choked out like that. I thought it was awesome. Good for Tony.
Absolutely. Now that's going to bring us to Alan Joban versus Rich Walsh. Both friends of the show. I didn't want to call it, and I still won't. What I do want to say is that was an absolutely stunning elbow to the side of Richard Walsh's head to set up the knockout victory for Alan Jouban. So congratulations to Alan and Richard. Recover, get back in the ring. We can't wait to see you get back at it. Fred, what did you think about that stoppage of Filthy Rich?
I thought it was justified. I thought that Jouban looked really good, though. That elbow was beautiful, man. I love those, nothing like a beautiful elbow getting landed like that. So I thought it was a nice finish. I thought, I guess you're going to have people that said it might have been a little bit too early, but I thought, all things considered, it was a justified finish. He was rocked pretty bad. So if they didn't stop it right then, there's a good chance that he was going to eat some more elbows shortly thereafter, and it would have got stopped. So.
All right, I'm going to use some of Fred's language on that one. If you think that Richard Walsh got called out early, then you can kiss my ass, Jack. Because because I will tell you what, and Gary, you can feel free to agree or disagree, but when a fighter nuzzles the referee when he stops the fight, you know that boy didn't want to fight anymore. Would you agree with that? Because he gave him a full-on hug when that fight was stopped.
100%. 100%.
So you think that was a fair stoppage? Did you like that elbow by Alan Jouban?
Yeah, it was nice. It was a sweet. I like elbows.
That's a fact.
Paul Herrera just went, what the hell? He just felt somebody walk over his grave. So, absolutely. Congratulations, Alan Jouban. Perfectly placed, and I think a very fair stoppage. So we only have a couple minutes left. Why don't we go ahead and roundtable this real quick. Gary, favorite fight of the night?
My favorite fight of the night, I like Ronda's.
All right, Fred, favorite fight?
I hate to do this, but I got to do it to you, Gary. Ronda, man, she is incredible. In my opinion, she's one of the, if not the funnest fighter in MMA right now. 100% finishing rate. She's the champion. She is the Mike Tyson of our sport right now. 100% Ronda.
All right, Mark.
Usually I like to go against the grain, but I got to agree with the guys here. Like, that championship fight was awesome. I love watching the quick finishes. I mean, Ronda has turned me into, a big fan of female MMA. I was one of those sort of opposition people when it first came out, but she's an angry, angry woman when she gets in that cage.
Absolutely. Now, I always kind of pick weird fights for my favorites. For me, it was a split between Carnero and then the fight between Jouban and Walsh. To me, that showed true skill. Both of those guys in the Jouban-Walsh fight wanted to get at it. It ended the way that fans want to end it. And for me to see a guy like Carnero come back from such a long layoff and still look smooth, and you can tell that he's been training, and to take out a legitimate threat in Mark Munoz, I just love those kind of comeback stories. So that's what I'm going to go with. I'm going to split it between Jouban-Walsh and Munoz-Carnero, and that's going to wrap up the show. Fight fans, I want you to go over to @Gary H. Goodridge and give this guy as many follows as you possibly can. This is a guy that gave us the sport that we have now, and we absolutely cannot forget the pioneers of this sport that allow us to enjoy this great sport that we enjoy every weekend. And Gary, go ahead one more time. What's the name of your book, and who did you write it with?
The name of the book is Gatekeeper. I wrote it with Mark Dorsey. Yeah, it was fun.
And that is a story from the beginning of Gary Goodridge's career to the end. So I want to say thank you very much to Lub MMA for presenting our show. Go over to Lub MMA and find our homepage, the Stand and Bang homepage. We have all of our links there for Stitcher and for iTunes, and pretty soon we'll have the whole backlog of our show there, so you can find our show right from the very beginning. Other than that, another person that I want to give a shout to is Unique Kennels, Jamie Skipper over at Unique Kennels 71. Go ahead and check out what he's been doing there. 30 years of breeding English Bulldogs. He gives back to the sport. He's on banners, he's on shorts, and he's over at Facebook at Unique Kennels /Conway. Other than that, Mark, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Last Word Mark. Give me a follow. I'll follow you back every time.
Awesome. And Fred, go ahead and rep both of yours.
Follow me at Kirby_MMA, and then follow my site at Gem City Fighting.
Fantastic. And you can find our show at Stand in Bang Radio. Stand, the letter N, the word bang, radio over on Twitter. And you can give us a like over on MMA Press Row. We're currently doing a giveaway with some KGB Lee picks. So when we hit 1,400 likes, we'll give those away to some lucky fans. So thank you very much for listening, and we will be joined by Paul Felder next week. So make sure to tune in for that show.